The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Hello and welcome to Health for a Lifetime. I'm your host, Don McIntosh, and today I'm joined with Dr. Neil Nedley. Welcome back, Dr. Nedley.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Today we're going to be talking about something that could be depression.
Yes.
But hopefully by the end of the program, people will be impressed about what they can do about their depression. And what you've titled the program today, or what we're going to be talking about, is diet and depression. Many times when you think about that, you think if someone's really depressed, they're just eating all kinds of food. Is that what you mean by this?
Well, actually, that could be one of the symptoms of depression, eating all kinds of food.
Yeah, what are the symptoms of depression? Let's just go through those. How do you know if you're depressed? What is depression? How do you know if you have it?
Well, an appetite change is one of them. Some people will lose their appetite, and others will gain even more of an appetite and be eating all the time and get overweight as a result. In addition to that, deep sadness, of course, is another symptom, or a feeling of emptiness would also qualify there. Apathy, where the motivation goes down significantly. Agitation or restlessness can be another symptom of depression. Not being able to concentrate well, or inability to really make decisions well, can be another symptom of depression. A sleep disturbance, sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, can be a symptom of depression. And then feeling of worthlessness, and then another would be morbid thoughts, and then finally fatigue. If you just have 5 out of those 9 symptoms, you fit the classification of depression if they've lasted for more than 2 weeks.
So if you have 5 out of those 9, and you don't have, you haven't had a major trauma or life event that would cause anyone to be depressed, like your
Loss of a spouse.
Different things like that.
Right.
Then if you have 5 of those 9, then you actually will be diagnosed, if you go to the right people that are looking for this, as being depressed.
Correct.
Okay, so, but today we're going to focus in a little bit more on the causes of depression, what's causing it, then more specifically on the dietary aspect. What are some of the causes of depression?
Well, you know, Don, the brain can take usually 2 or 3 hits and do all right, but if it takes more than that, depression often results. And one of the causes is actually a genetic predisposition. That in and of itself isn't enough for people to be depressed, but if they have that, and maybe a nutritional cause that we'll get into later, and then some other life event, that can actually tide them over into depression. And so it is important, if your mother or father have had a history of major depression, that is one of those risk factors you can't do anything about, but you need to know about it. It doesn't mean it's a given, but it means that you need to be on a good diet and lifestyle program so that you don't come down with the same thing that your parents did.
So I noticed that you have listed non-modifiable risk factors.
Right.
What would those be?
Genetics is one of them. Another is actually if you were not raised by both biological parents. That wasn't something you could do something about when you were a teenager or when you were 8 years old, but your parents splitting up actually put you
depression.
at a greater risk.
Good.
One of those non-modifiable risk factors for depression. In addition to that, gender. Being a female makes you twice as more likely for depression than if you're a male, and things such as that.
So things that you just can't modify, but if you're aware of them, that's taking one of those hits, so to speak, what you're
That's
talking
right.
about.
Yes.
So then moving more closely to this idea of the connection between diet and depression, you covered this, and I believe you're writing a book about all this, right?
Correct, yes.
And I don't know if it'll be out by the time our viewers see this.
Hopefully.
But hopefully it will be. And they contact you about that, or 3ABN can get in touch with you. But and then in the rough draft here of your book that we're looking at and different things, you look at some dietary factors. This is really something you can do something about. I mean, no one's twisting your arm, eat that chocolate, or eat that kale. You have to make the decision.
That's right. And diet is an important aspect to depression. It is not the entire circle of things. There are lifestyle issues as well. But I have seen many individuals that are depressed, and their depression was cured by getting them on the right diet, and that was the only change that they made. And so it is an important factor for any person who has a tendency to depression or is depressed to understand.
Okay, so well, let's try and understand it. What are the real components of foods that depress us?
Well, there are certain components if we don't get enough of, we will get depressed, and then there are others that if we get too much, we will get depressed. One of those components that we need in our brain in order to avoid depression is serotonin. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that is used extensively in the frontal lobe of the brain. And with depression being a disease of the frontal lobe that science has just elucidated in the last 10 years, it's very important that we get enough serotonin. Our neurons in our brain cannot make enough serotonin unless we have enough tryptophan in the diet. Tryptophan is an amino acid. It's a building block of protein. And there is many individuals that are not on enough tryptophan and thus do not make enough serotonin.
So what you're saying is that frontal part of the brain needs to have this, what do you call serotonin? Is it a hormone or is it a...
It's a neurotransmitter.
It's a transmitter. It helps get those synapses together, connect them
Helps
together.
one nerve to communicate with another.
But you're saying that our brains don't make enough of that on their own. They need some additional in the diet.
That's right. They
Or,
need the substrate.
They need the stuff to build it at least.
Correct.
They need the building blocks. And you're saying that's tryptophan. Isn't that found in meat?
Yes, it is. It is found in meat. It's also found in plant food. And it tends to be found in individuals that aren't getting enough. It tends to be those that have the appetite change where they actually lose their appetite. These are the more anorexic, depressed individuals that tend to not get enough tryptophan. But the interesting thing is, Don, even though you may be getting enough in the diet, there are 5 other amino acids that compete with tryptophan to get across the blood-brain barrier. And if you're getting enough tryptophan, but you're getting more than you should of those 5 amino acids, you'll still not get enough to make serotonin.
So what kind of foods have are there any foods that don't have those 5 competing amino acids going along with the tryptophan?
Well, all foods tend to have all of these amino acids, but they're in different proportions. The meat foods are relatively high in tryptophan, but they're very high in these 5 amino acids. And thus...
so they're really fighting it out. If you eat meat, at the synapses, there's just a brawl going on.
There's a brawl going on as far as getting enough tryptophan in the diet when you're eating meat. You really need to be getting your tryptophan from plant sources that have a much higher tryptophan to amino acid ratio. And those foods will be better as far as enhancing the mood is concerned.
This is probably why animals don't suffer so much with depression, right? They get their food from plants.
Yes, certain animals. Other animals might have a little problems with their brain because they're eating meat all the time.
That's true. I mean, there's a whole new, this is totally out the subject, there's a whole new idea of having psychologists and psychiatrists for your pets, but I don't think we want to go there. But I don't know, it would be interesting to know whether or not the animals that eat a carnivorous diet are a little more depressed than the others. But okay, back to humans. What are some of those foods then that are high in the building blocks of this needed neurotransmitter? What are the foods that are high in tryptophan?
Well, the highest food source known is tofu, actually. Tofu is very high in tryptophan, and it is a very good food as far as a depressed patient is concerned.
So tofu, does it grow on trees? What is it?
Tofu is actually soybean curd.
Okay.
It's concentrated. That's why it's so high in tryptophan. But the soybean curd itself and the way it's produced actually brings out more of the tryptophan.
So number 1, tofu.
Yes.
So tame your tofu and tame your depression, or take in tofu and tame your depression.
There you go.
Okay, so that's number one. Get that tofu.
Pumpkin seeds are the second highest source.
I love pumpkin seeds. Did you ever do that where you had those pumpkins that you decorated or different things during Thanksgiving time, and you take those pumpkin seeds out? And what do you do? Is this the way you do it? You just bake them in the oven? Does that mess up the tryptophan at all?
No, it doesn't. No, you're going to get plenty of tryptophan doing that. Roasted pumpkin seeds.
I love those pumpkin seeds. Do your children like the pumpkin seeds?
Oh, yes. They enjoy them a lot. Third highest is gluten.
Gluten.
Yeah, made out of wheat.
So that's the
Gluten flour.
A lot of these fake steaks and phony bologna, sham ham, that's all made out of gluten, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's actually a pretty good source of tryptophan.
It doesn't taste bad either. I like gluten. Gluten steaks. My wife makes those nice fake steak sandwiches. Gluten.
And then almonds would be a good source. Black walnuts, black-eyed peas are actually a good source of tryptophan.
Black walnuts, black-eyed peas, and
almonds.
Almonds.
Mm-hmm. Now, those are foods that are high in tryptophan, but if we take a look, and I did this recently, actually, in preparing for this book, when the new study showed these 5 amino acids competed with tryptophan, I thought it was very important to actually find out which foods have the highest tryptophan to those 5 amino acid ratios, because those are the foods that are going to be the best as far as enhancing our serotonin production in our brain. And the food that came out the highest, sesame seeds.
Sesame seeds. So tahini sauce, hummus.
Yes.
Sesame seeds.
Yes. Hummus is one of my favorite.
Oh, man, I tell you, we could take a break right now and go for some hummus. That's right. So hummus. What else? What else was high?
Almonds were the second highest source when we took a look at this ratio.
Almond butter.
Yes, almond butter, excellent source. And then the foods we just mentioned also came out pretty high, again, because they're plant foods and not animal foods. They're not high in these other 5 amino acids. And another food that came out reasonably high was brown rice.
Brown rice. You know that brown rice with a little tofu on top?
Yes.
And then a few tomatoes?
Yeah, and then some almond slices in there.
And goodbye depression.
There you go.
Or at least, hello, serotonin.
Serotonin.
Serotonin. Right.
That's right.
Okay, great. Any other foods you want to mention about serotonin?
Well, that pretty much sums up the list as far as the foods that are high in tryptophan. Now, in addition to this, we also need to get enough bright light in the daytime. You have to have the tryptophan around, but in addition to that, serotonin is made by the brain when bright light is seen through the eyes.
Only through the eyes.
Correct. And that bright light has to be outdoor light or at least bright enough indoors to be able to take a picture with a camera without using any flash.
I think we're okay today, aren't we?
I think we're probably getting enough
So we get a
today.
little hummus, some sesame seeds here, and then we're okay.
That's right.
Is this why in these countries like the Scandinavian countries they have a lot of depression, they don't have enough bright light?
Correct. We call that a different type of depression. It's called seasonal affective disorder because it happens to be in the wintertime. That's why it's seasonal. But yes, just about everyone will get depression in those countries unless they actually go in for bright light therapy. And there are places, you can find them on every corner up there in northern Scandinavia in the wintertime where people will go in and sit there for 30 minutes to get their bright light to make their serotonin for the day. Otherwise, they will end up with pretty deep depression.
So there's the diet and depression, but also having that sunlight. We're talking with Dr. Nedley about diet and depression. We're talking about foods that are high in substances that we need to negate depression or reverse it or at least prevent it. When we come back, we're going to talk about more foods that you need to eat. That's right, good news, foods that you need to eat to not be depressed. Join us when we come back.
Have you found yourself wishing that you could shed a few pounds? Have you been on a diet for most of your life, but not found anything that will really keep the weight off? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, then we have a solution for you that works. Dr. Hans Diehl and Dr. Eileen Ludington have written a marvelous booklet called Reversing Obesity Naturally, and we'd like to send it to you free of charge. Here's a medically sound approach successfully used by thousands who are able to eat more and lose weight permanently without feeling guilty or hungry through lifestyle medicine. Dr. Diehl and Dr. Ludington have been featured on 3ABN, and in this booklet, They present a sensible approach to eating, nutrition, and lifestyle changes that can help you prevent heart disease, diabetes, and even cancer. Call or write today for your free copy of Reversing Obesity Naturally, and you could be on your way to a healthier, happier you. It's absolutely free of charge, so call or write today.
Welcome back. We've been talking with Dr. Neil Nedley about diet and depression, and we have found good news.
Yes.
We have some foods that we can eat that can make us happy, snappy, and not so sappy, so to speak. So we were talking about one particular level or neurotransmitter that's needed, that being serotonin. Serotonin. And we found out that if we eat that, plant foods of that, we don't have all those other amino acids that are fighting it out for control there at the synaptal level, or where these things hook together. What else do we need? What other foods do we need to eat to help us avoid depression?
Foods high in folate are also important. A folic acid deficiency, which is one of the B vitamins, will actually cause a depression in many individuals. And this depression is not treatable by putting them on antidepressants. In fact, they do not respond at all to antidepressants.
So if they have Zoloft, Prozac, whatever,
It doesn't seem to work.
it has to be folates.
That's right.
So what are the foods that are high in folates?
Well, the plant foods are very high in folate. Animal foods have a little bit. Beef, for instance, it would take about 2 large servings of beef to get 16 micrograms of folate. You need 400 micrograms of folate a day in your diet. And the way to get that is through eating the plant foods.
Green leafy vegetables.
Green leafy vegetables would be high in folate. And there are foods that are very high in folate. Okra, for instance, fortunately.
Okra. Let's line up for some okra.
I live in Oklahoma. We call it OK Raw there because there's an abundance of growing okra there in Oklahoma. But in addition to okra, actually lentils are even a higher source.
So lentil stew. They fought over that in the Bible, you know.
Yes, that's right.
Maybe they knew about this.
Maybe they knew about this.
These are very high in folates.
Yeah, in fact, just 1 cup of lentils would have you double the amount of folate that you need every day, over 800 micrograms a day.
Broccoli?
Broccoli is a fairly good source of folic acid. Spinach is even a better source, 109 micrograms of folate in spinach. Navy beans would be even a better source yet. Highest source, black-eyed peas.
Black-eyed peas. They even have a restaurant chain that's named Black-eyed Pea Restaurant now. I don't even know if they serve those there, but because I've never been in, but very high. So that should remind you, when you go down the road, black eye.
Yeah. But actually, if you're eating an abundance of fruits and vegetables and grains and even some nuts every day, such as peanuts, you're going to get well and above your 400 micrograms of folate. So this would be a type of depression that's extremely rare in vegetarians. But among the meat-eating population in America, you'd be surprised how many people are not getting enough folate in their diet and are actually suffering from the effects of that.
So then we have the serotonin, we have folic acid. What else is on the doctor's prescription for avoiding depression or reversing it?
Omega-3 fatty acids.
Sounds big. Where do we pick those up?
We pick those up from certain plant oils, and in the animal kingdom, they're present in the ocean fish, the cold water ocean fish.
So deep sea diving, deep sea fishing, are you recommending that we go out and just spear a few before noon?
Well, that would give you enough of the omega-3, but it would also give you some other things that you may not want to have. Unfortunately, we're finding out because of the industrial age in which we live in, Don, that fish are laden with pesticides, mercury, other toxins. The fish in the Great Lakes, about half of them have cancer. And it's just an incredible disease population now in the fish because of all of the industrial things that they are exposed to.
So if Jesus was living today, he probably wouldn't have fish.
I don't think today. Now, in his day, fish were probably healthier than our fruits and vegetables today. But in our day, it isn't a very healthy food. Now, it can provide omega-3 fatty acids, and if you are not eating the plant foods that are high in omega-3, it'd probably be a good idea for you to take the risk and get the omega-3 through the fish route. But fortunately, there are plant sources of omega-3, and I should mention the fish don't make the omega-3 themselves. They actually get it from
Kelp?
From the seaweed.
Seaweed.
The cold water ocean seaweed is very high in eicosapentaenoic acid. It's a type of omega-3 fatty acid, and that's where they get it from.
So if you want to eat some seaweed, you're good to go with that. But let's say you're not really going to want to, belly up to the plate there with the seaweed. Where should you go?
Well, you need to go to certain foods that are high in omega-3 fat. And I'd like to emphasize that even vegetarians can have problems with omega-3 fatty acid deficiencies. I have found both in the meat-eating population as well as in the vegetarian population, people that are not getting enough omega-3 in their diet. And as a result, they can end up with depression, or they can even, studies are showing now that even bipolar disorder may come about as a result of not getting enough omega-3 in the diet.
So what do you need to eat to get that?
The highest source is actually flaxseed.
Flaxseed. Now, I wouldn't go to the store and say, give me a couple of pounds of flaxseed. What do you recommend?
Well, actually, you can go to the store and get flaxseed. Your health food store will definitely have it, and even some of the major grocery stores now are carrying flaxseed.
What do you do? Sprinkle it on something else? Flaxseed loaf? Flaxseed popsicles? What do you do?
Well, that's what you can do. Actually, taking the flaxseed and then putting it in like a coffee grinder, a couple of tablespoons a day. It'll just take 2 seconds for that to grind up into a powder. You can put that on your cereal. You can put it in your juice. Or you can actually make a nut butter out of it. We have taken the second highest source, which is English walnuts of omega-3, and combined them with the highest source, which is flaxseed, and made like a peanut butter out of it. It's very tasty, and it's very healthy.
Okay, so our omega-3 fats. Anything else about omega-3 fats, depression in the brain?
Well, I think it's important to emphasize the plant sources. You know, there is so much emphasis these days in getting fish in the diet, and I think this is a misplaced emphasis. We really need to put that emphasis on omega-3. And fish can spare you from heart disease, but it's going to increase the risk of cancer from what we know about it. We're just trading one disease for another. It's much better to get the omega-3 fatty acids from the plant sources where we don't have to worry about all the contaminants and the pesticides and those type of things that are in there.
I noticed in the book that you're writing that's going to be released soon that you mentioned that breast milk has a high amount of omega-3, whereas cow's milk does not.
That's right. Cow's milk has virtually no omega-3 in it. And even the infant formulas do not have an omega-3. If you're going to get your omega-3 from birth, which is really what you need, you know, in order for the brain to develop completely normally, it needs to have omega-3 starting from birth. That is from human breast milk. And studies are now showing that those that did not have the advantage of being raised with human breast milk have a 9 to 10 point lower IQ as adults than what they would have had they been raised on the omega-3 milk, which is the human breast milk.
Amazing. So if someone can't breastfeed and they're on that formula or different, they need to find some way to get those omega-3s to the little ones as they're coming up. That's what you'd find.
And as adults, canola oil is a very good source of omega-3. Green soybeans are a good source of omega-3. The mature soybeans are good sources of omega-6, which compete with the omega-3. So we recommend if you're wanting to get the omega-3, you eat the green soybeans. I don't know if you've ever had them done.
I've had green soybeans.
You've had them? Yeah, we usually put them on our salad. They're pretty good. And
a little chewy?
Yeah, and very high in omega-3 content. And then spinach. Now, you don't think of spinach being a fatty food, but the type of fat it has is omega-3.
Well, I think after the program we should just go out and slam back a few omega-3s together, get some soybeans and just have a great time.
Yeah.
Well, you have some other things on your list here, and I want to get through this list because I know the people don't want to be depressed. What about vitamin B12 and depression?
You need to get enough. Vegetarians can have a problem there as well as the meat-eating population if they don't have enough intrinsic factor. Most people that are B12 deficient are not vegetarians. They're getting plenty in their diet, but they're not absorbing it well. So if somebody has depression, we check a B12 level in everybody to make sure. And nowadays you can get B12 in plant sources that are fortified, the plant or rice milks or soy milks. I can
Cereals.
have it. Cereals can have 100% of your RDA. So you can get it through plant fortified sources. If you're going to get it from animal sources, the best source would be skim milk, although you can get it from meat, but you want to avoid the cholesterol. So it'd be better to choose skim milk if you're going to get an animal source.
Foods to avoid depression. And we've talked about a lot of them. You have one down here, homocysteine in depression. Tell us about that.
Yeah, there's recent studies linking homocysteine with heart disease as well as depression. And we're not exactly sure the reasons for that. It's still being elucidated. But a high meat diet is going to produce a high homocysteine in the bloodstream because it's high in methionine, which is the substrate for homocysteine. And so another reason to try to avoid the animal-based diets as far as depression is concerned.
You have down here protein in your book and early puberty. How does that relate to depression?
Yeah, protein excess will result in early puberty, particularly in girls. And once they go through an early puberty, they are at a marked increased risk for depression the rest of their life. And so even the foods that girls are eating from infancy onward, even when they're eating at 8, 9, and 10, can have a bearing on their brain and their tendency for depression the rest of their life. And so we recommend a diet that's only moderate in protein, not high protein like the average American girl is consuming, where they start having their periods by age 11 or 12 instead of starting their periods at age 14, 15, or later, which is what they do if they were on a more low-fat, low-protein diet.
So the easiest way to do that is to cut out the meat and dairy?
That would be the easiest way.
And then do you really have to worry so much? Is the mother's advice where you go to the store and you have something of every color on your plate still pretty good advice?
It's not bad advice, actually. A variety of fruits and vegetables and grains, as well as some nuts, particularly the nuts high in omega-3, are very healthy for the body as well as for the mind.
You're a Christian physician. God knew what he was doing when he talked about foods and recommended them. Does he give conflicting messages about foods?
I don't think so. It's interesting that the book of Genesis, the first chapter, actually gives God's original diet for man. And the original diet for man talks about the foods that we've been talking about that science has just discovered are the best foods as far as preventing as well as treating depression.
We've been talking with Dr. Neil Nedley. We've been talking about depression. We've been talking about how it relates to nutrition. And really, Doctor, we could say you are what you eat, or you are what you don't eat. If you would like a copy of today's program, please contact 3ABN. You can get all this information in Dr. Nedley's new book that's coming out or maybe out when you're watching this. So call us, and we'll hope that as a result you'll have health that lasts for a lifetime.